Hello and a warm welcome to our Facebook Live this afternoon or this morning, wherever you are in the world and watching. I'm so grateful that you're here with me today, and we've got a fascinating subject, the struggles of an empath and how to become an empowered empath. So that's the phrase we're going to be using today, how to become an empowered empath. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Ashok Gupta, and it's lovely to be with you today. We're going to say hello to all of you in the second part of our Facebook Live. So this first part, we're going to cover the struggles of an empath and how to overcome them. In our second half, we will say hello to all of you and answer some of your questions as well in a separate Facebook Live. So this is a topic that a lot of you have written in and you've wanted me to talk about. So it's been a long time in the making. So let's really dive in and understand what some of the struggles are of being an empath. So the first question is, what exactly is an empath? Well, an empath is somebody who finds it very easy to pick up on the emotions, whether they be positive or negative, of another person, and not just pick up on them, then sense them, then actually experience them. Yeah, the ability to empathize, to understand someone else's emotions, and actually be with them to such an extent that you actually experience them yourself. So that's the definition of what it means to be an empath. And the way to look at it is if you imagine a couple of guitar strings. So when a guitar string vibrates, the guitar string next to it also vibrates. Okay, so there's a frequency that someone is vibrating at. And sometimes we talk about someone giving off a negative vibe or a negative vibration. And so we also vibrate with that negative vibration. And you know, all of us to some extent are empaths or have an empathic ability. It's just a question of whether we nurture that ability. So we've all had that situation where we've walked into a room and without knowing it, we can feel there's a negative vibe. We've not even spoken to anyone or even seen anyone's face, but we can pick up on that negative vibration that we see or feel in that room. And empaths are people who are constantly picking up on the vibrational quality around them, whether that be from people or the world around them, or even animals or nature. They have that degree of sensitivity. And of course, being an empath is something to be celebrated. It's not a negative thing. However, if we are what I call a disempowered empath, there can be some negative consequences to being an empath. The main one being, we can't help but take on the negative vibrations and negativity of other people around us. So that's what we're really going to talk about today, the downside of being a disempowered empath. And during our conversation, we'll be talking about how we can transform into an empowered empath. So have all of the upside without some of the downsides of that skill or that quality. So there's a couple of friends that I want to introduce you to who've been dying to get on screen and be in one of our Facebook Lives. So there are lovely actresses who will be joining us for the rest of today's session. So I'd like to introduce you to a couple of my friends. We have Anita, the empath, and we have Jess, the princess. Okay, so they'll be joining us today to demonstrate some of the transformations that we're going to be talking about. Yeah, very surreal moment on Facebook Live here, but hopefully you're still tuning in. So Anita is someone who is an empath, who has that empathic quality, the ability to pick up on other people's vibrations and emotions and to actually feel them herself. And Jess is somebody who's going to play the role of the negative person or the toxic person, or the person who's always talking about themselves. So Anita and Jess are friends and they meet. And of course, when we're talking about being an empath and the negative consequences, these can be in friendships, these can be in work situations, these can be parent-child interactions. So that empathic ability can demonstrate itself in so many of our relationships. So Anita and Jess are actually friends. And when they meet, Jess is somebody who has a lot of things going on in her life and wants to complain about them, blame other people, and is in generally a very negative mood. Now, of course, we all have people who need our support in times of need, but there are people in our lives, and these can be our partners, our parents, our friends, who seem to be completely negative a lot of the time, or partially negative a lot of the time. And so Jess is one of those people who gets lost in her negativity. And so she's talking about all the difficulties that she's having, financial problems, her partner's left her, she's finding life a challenge, she just thinks things aren't going her way. And Anita comes along and listens, but Anita loses the light. And what I mean by that is, normally she's in her light, she's a very intuitive person, she's quite spiritually advanced in some ways. But when she's with Jess, she loses it and becomes what we call enmeshed. Enmeshment means she now picks up and experiences those very emotions which Jess is experiencing. It's almost like she's offloading those emotions to Anita. And sometimes that can be because when Jess is talking about her problems, sometimes she triggers those same feelings and emotions in Anita, which triggering her own emotions, her own issues. Sometimes it's simply because everyone we meet, we're exchanging energy with. So when these two people meet, Jess's vibrations get picked up and are transferred over to Anita. There's that exchange of energy. And in that moment, Anita normally is quite a compassionate, aware person, but she loses that awareness. She loses that stillness. She loses her light, and she gets lost in Jess's problems. And the energy gets transferred from Jess to Anita. Anita then feels that stuck energy inside her. And what are some of the signs of that? She feels constricted. She feels those negative vibrations and she feels drained. She just feels like she wants to escape or run away from the situation. And because Anita is a disempowered empath, she thinks, right, I hate feeling like this and I hate her feeling like this. I want to fix this for Jess. How can I fix it for her? So she gets into that role of rescuing Jess from her problems, trying to fix it for her. Or she starts pitying Jess and saying, Jess, that's terrible. That's awful. How could that person have done that to you? And in that way, all she ends up doing is enabling Jess's negativity. And Anita also experiences her energy levels going right down. And that subjective sense of energy we can call life force, or in Eastern thought, it's called prana or chi energy. It's that life force that runs through our entire system that gives us that subjective feeling of feeling light and expanded and positive versus feeling drained and having low energy and low life force. And sometimes as an empath, we often are born with that ability. But if we've been through challenging childhoods, that can mean we learn to be hypervigilant to other people's emotions. We start to worry about what other people are experiencing. And if we've had dysfunctional family relationships, we can begin to think that we're responsible to fix everybody around us, especially if we're the children of parents who had addictions or were abusive in some way. Then as an empath, we become highly disempowered. And we can become a helper. Some of you who follow the Gupta program, which is my treatment for chronic conditions, chronic illnesses, you will know that we use Anita as the helper role, or the helper personality trait. Or we become the approval seeker, and therefore empathically are constantly picking up on other people's vibrations. Yeah? And some of the symptoms of this can be that longer term, if we remain as an empath, a disempowered empath, taking on the negative vibrations of people around us, it can make us anxious and depressed. It can mean that we feel a victim of other people's negativities. And we feel that the world is a dangerous place or a bad place. And we start withdrawing from the world. So sometimes we start withdrawing from social situations or places where we can be in the light and demonstrate our power. We become disempowered. And worst of all, I've seen many people who have this empathic ability who then become cynics. They become negative themselves, and they start withdrawing from the world, seeing the world as a negative place, and they become cynical about the world, cynical about people. And this is essentially a hard shell that we put around ourselves to protect our empathic selves. to protect our soul in some ways. But that hard shell, that tortoise shell that we put around ourselves as empaths, won't help us. Instead, we're repressing those emotions. And then we can develop health problems as well. So many empaths start developing certain health issues, and some of them can be things like ME and chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, other kinds of sensitivities or other types of illnesses, which we treat using the Gupta program. And so many of my patients suffer from these disempowered empath qualities, which is why we're doing this Facebook Live. Now, how can we move from being a disempowered empath with all those negative aspects or draining aspects to being an empowered empath? Well, let's have a look at the situation that we're in. So let's rewind. Jess has come forward and is speaking in a very negative way, in a toxic way, and literally sucking the energy out of Anita. We sometimes call them energy vampires. When Jess is expressing these, it isn't the real issue. Yeah? Often we're not really expressing the real issue. The biggest problem that we have as humankind is our inability to resolve our emotions, our inability to express them, our inability to dissolve them. And that's why things like meditation and breathing and having a good close network are very important to be able to resolve our emotions. And so often negative people underlying it, they have some toxic emotions stuck within them, such as grief or sadness or shame or guilt. And Jess, at a deeper level, wants to resolve those deeper emotions, but she doesn't know how to. So what toxic or negative people do is they meet other people and play a role of being the complainer, the blamer. So they will complain about how terrible their life is to Anita, or they'll start blaming people around them or blaming Anita for how they're feeling. Or they'll be a pity seeker, looking for pity and looking for confirmation or justification for how bad their lives are. And they look to you to justify it. Or they keep talking and talking and talking about themselves and never show any interest in you, because at some level, they're looking for you to give them a sticking plaster. Jess thinks, if Anita shows me some positivity and some sympathy and buys into my problems and gets enmeshed with me, then I temporarily feel better. But it's not authentic. It's not an authentic way of resolving that underlying emotion that Jess has. Jess wants to resolve that underlying emotion, but she uses being negative, being disempowered, complaining and blaming as a way of temporarily trying to justify how bad her life is, or making excuses for themselves. So often blamers and complainers make excuses by feeling negative. Okay. They can play the drama queen, literally. And Anita buys into it and thinks, well, let me feel sorry for this person. Let me take on their emotions. Let me buy into their tragedy. And in that way, maybe I'll be able to help. And then the empath feels the pain and thinks, I want to get rid of this pain for Jess, and I want to get rid of the pain for myself. I have to rescue them and I have to fix them. Unfortunately, that isn't going to work. Yeah. And sometimes we indulge in being Pollyanna and saying, hey, Jess, everything's going to be okay. And we start indulging in positive statements. But unfortunately, Jess thinks, hang on, this person isn't taking my problem seriously. And often the negative person can resist your positive statements and can become even more negative to try and prove that you're wrong. Or we try to fix their issue. But it's too early to fix. Only Jess can fix her problems for herself. Or we try to tell them how terrible their problems are. Oh gosh, Jess, that's terrible. Wow, you really are going through so much. I feel so bad for you. How could that person treat you? And sometimes if we're not careful, we become an enabler. We start enabling their victimhood and that victim mentality by telling them and confirming to them how bad their lives are. And in doing this, we've stepped out of that strength, that witnessing awareness, and got lost and enmeshed in their problems. So how can we resolve this interaction? Well, firstly, recognize that Jess's negativity, Jess's complaining and blaming and all the other things that negative, toxic people do, is masking what's really going on for her. And when we recognize that, instead of getting lost in their problems, it's easier to feel compassion for what they're going through, because underlying it is an emotion, a strong unresolved emotion. And those of you familiar with the Meaning of Life app, you'll know that unresolved emotions are one of the 4 conditionings that we talk about. So there's an unresolved emotion within Jess. And when we see beyond the complaining and we notice the grief or we notice the pain, then it's easier to feel compassion and stay in our light. So how do we transform from a disempowered empath to an empowered empath? It's as easy as A, B, C, D. Okay. So this is a process that we can go through when we notice ourselves getting drained by negative people around us. A stands for awareness and acceptance. So first of all, instead of getting lost in that negativity and lost in Jess's pain, instead, we become aware of what's going on inside of us. So we say to ourselves, okay, how am I feeling right now? Am I getting drained by this person? Am I getting lost in the negativity? Let me step out of that and be aware that it's not mine to experience. It's not mine to do something with. It's not my pain. Let me hand it back to this person. Let me separate myself off from the pain that this person is going through. It's not mine to fix, and it's not mine to rescue her from her pain. Are we stuck in an old dynamic? Sometimes with our parents, with our partners, with our siblings, with our children, we get stuck in that negative dynamic of this person expressing their pain through complaining and blaming and feeling the victim, and we become the person that they suck the energy out of. Am I stuck in another dynamic like this? And that A for acceptance, what can help us step out of their pain into our own strength, is to recognize that each soul must walk their path. We can't take responsibility for Jess's path and Jess's pain. That is hers to deal with. And we may judge that soul and judge their path and judge their pain, but then we disempower them. Because at a deeper level, we can have a philosophical understanding or a philosophical perspective that each soul must walk their path and experience the ups and downs of life, because that is what they've chosen at a deeper level. We can't interfere with that. We can support their healing through that, but we cannot judge their path. And when we recognize that, then we stop trying to fix them or rescue them, or we stop resisting their pain and thinking how terrible what they're going through. We recognize that they are there to walk their path, and we can support and help them in whatever way we can, if they ask for it. Yeah. Each soul is strengthened through the challenges that they go through. So let's not judge that. It shifts them and elevates them to the next stage in their conscious evolution or unconscious evolution, whatever way it may be. So that's the first thing. Awareness of what's going for us and stepping out of that, and acceptance for what they're going through and saying, this is not mine to heal. This is theirs. Return to sender. B stands for boundaries and self-care. In this moment, am I able to step into my own light, or do I need to have some space from this person? Empaths do need their own space. They can't be around people who are too negative for too long, because inevitably they pick up on the vibrations. So it's having boundaries with that person, having space. And in general in life, empaths can be highly sensitive people, or HSPs. So it is important for them to regularly recharge in nature. You know, we charge up our phones, right? But if we aren't charging ourselves up in nature or regular meditation, then we're running our battery at 20%. And when we've got low prana, low life force, low chi energy, when we're around negative people, it'll be much easier for them to pull us down and drain our energy. So maintaining the light means that self-care of regular morning and evening meditation. And as many of you know, we have a free not-for-profit app called the Meaning of Life Experiment, with lots of great 10 and 20-minute meditations. And it'd be lovely if you haven't already, you can start a regular program of meditation And you will notice how that really supports your ability to heal mentally, physically, and emotionally, and also your ability to handle negative people around you. And what goes with that is obviously eating healthily, getting good sleep, making sure you engage in positive, uplifting pursuits instead of negative things, and spending your time around positive people. But we can't do that all the time. We will obviously encounter negative people, or people who've got a lot of things going on in their lives right now, a lot of issues. It doesn't mean we hide from them, but can we stand in our power? So B for boundaries and self-care, very, very important. And our ability to say no. Sometimes as empaths, we think we have to say yes to everybody and take on their situation and rescue them. But sometimes we need to say no to protect our boundaries. C stands for conscious compassion. Now that we've stepped out of their negativity into our light, how can we make sure that we're consciously compassionate rather than unconsciously compassionate? Unconsciously compassionate means we get lost in their story, in their tragedy. We're buying into it. And we're unconsciously attempting to be compassionate, but instead we're lost. We've got sucked in. Consciously compassionate means staying in the light and observing what's going on for Jess. And that means we show care, we show compassion, and we show that sympathy and empathy through saying, I understand what you're going through. That must have been hard. But we don't get lost in their negativity. We remain separate and conscious. And we then have a holding place where we hold them in the light. So they're able to actually express what's going on for them. And we become a conduit for that healing energy to be transferred to them without it draining our energy, because we've remained alert and conscious. We've remained as that witnessing awareness. And that's so important. And we'll talk more about that. D stands for discernment. So once we are standing in our light, discernment means now that we have listened to what they're going through, what is this person ready for? What's really underlying their experiences? So with discernment, firstly, we can compassionately understand what model they fit. So are they the complainer? When they're talking, are they the blamer? Are they blaming everybody else? Are they looking for pity and sympathy? Are they somebody who just wants to keep talking about themselves? Are they literally looking to offload all their negativity to somebody else? So we identify what's going on for them. And then underlying that, we look to identify what is their pain? What is it? Grief? Is it sadness? Is it not taking responsibility for their lives? And then we can, in a very compassionate way, ask leading questions. So we ask them questions to help them come to their own awareness. They cannot transform from a negative, disempowered person to a positive person by you telling them to. They can only transform through you allowing them to build their awareness, build the muscle of awareness and responsibility for what they're going through. So you may ask questions like, how could this be different for you? Or what would you need to do for that person to react differently? Or what could you change in your life to move forward? Or how could you handle that situation better? What would make you feel better in the short term? Have you thought about meditation? Do you find that useful? So you are showing that conscious compassion. You're understanding what they're going through. You're maintaining your light. And you are asking them leading questions to help them move forward. And this is a common way of helping people in coaching, is to ask leading questions to help them come to their own understanding, because you cannot fix them. Sometimes we start getting into advice and advising people when they're not ready to hear it. So D for discernment is this person ready for some positive uplifting statements? Are they ready for advice? What are they looking for? What's going to help them right now? And then more often than not, it's about asking some leading questions to help them build their awareness. And that helps you stop thinking that you've got to take on their emotions and try and heal them and help them. And of course, with all of these things, empaths often get overstimulated by being around too many people, too many stimulating situations. So when empaths learn self-care and those boundaries, they become stronger and they are better able to interact with negative people. And let's just do a short exercise to demonstrate this, because it's all about making this very practical for you. So, you know, often it's the story writers and the playwrights who unconsciously are talking about very human emotions. So I'm sure many of you are fans of Harry Potter, and you may have heard of these shadow forces called dementors. So dementors represent those negative energies that move towards us. And in Harry Potter, they're able to create a spell, which is a force field around them, which is called a Patronus spell. Yeah, so we're using this as an analogy. So in the same way, we can create that spell. So first of all, let me show you a short video clip from Harry Potter, which demonstrates creating this shield around those negative forces, and then we'll actually do it ourselves. Okay. Okay.
Harry! Expecto Patronum!
Okay, so that Harry Potter clip is a great example of where we can actually create this force field around us to protect us from those negative energies. So let's just very briefly do this right now using the ABCD. So what I'd love for you to do, if you're an empath, is to just close your eyes, and we'll go through this exercise. And this is something that then you can repeat when you're around others. So let's just close our eyes. So when we notice ourselves getting drained by other people's negativity, the first thing to do is take a deep breath in and go into that awareness as we breathe out. So we breathe out that person's negative energy and surrender it to love. To imagine a representation of love in front of us. So let's take that slow, deep breath in and breathe out those negative vibrations and negative energy and say, this isn't mine. This isn't mine to hold on to. And we surrender it to a representation of love. And that to you could be the universe, or Jesus, or Krishna, or a pet, or a partner. Something that represents love to you, you surrender it. And in that awareness, we become aware of what was going on for us. Were we buying into their story too much? Or were we resisting their pain and what they were experiencing? Or were we trying to fix it for them? What made us get lost in their energy field? So there's that awareness. And there's also awareness of what they're going through. Are they a complainer, a blamer, somebody who doesn't take responsibility? And what's the underlying emotion for them? And we accept. So A is also for acceptance. We accept what they go through. It's okay for their soul to walk this path and for them to experience pain and suffering. That is for them to experience. That is not my responsibility to hold on to. So A is awareness and acceptance. B is for boundaries and self-care. Is this now a situation that I need to remove myself from? Or can I at least maintain my boundary of that compassionate force field around me to remain separate from what they're going through? Am I meditating? Am I taking care of myself? So that's the boundaries and self-care. C is now that conscious compassion. And this is where we hold them in the light. So we imagine our representation of love in front of us. We take a slow, deep breath in, and we imagine a beautiful, colorful light, a bright white light or a golden color, whatever represents love to you. Start enveloping your whole being and creating a force field around you. And you imagine your representation of love and how loving you feel towards that representation of love and how much love you receive from that representation. You fill yourself up with a representation of that feeling. You're glowing with that force field and you smile. And in that compassionate space, you observe what the other person is going through and you empathically pick up and are attuned to their vibration, but you don't take it on. It doesn't bring you down. It is separate to you and is there to hold. And with that compassion, you're able to observe which category they fit into and observe what's underlying it. What emotion or unresolved grief is what's really bothering them. And as you hold yourself in that light with a big smile, double the energy. So imagine that grounding, powerful energy engulfing your whole being, creating a force field around you, and their negativity just bounces off your force field. And that colorful energy keeps rising through your body and circulating and creating that beautiful space for you. And in that space, D stands for discernment. What is this person ready for right now? Are they just offloading? Are they just playing the victim? How can I support them the best way? Do I just listen with a sympathetic ear without getting lost in it and just show some empathy? Or do I ask them leading questions? Are they ready for that? And ask them, how can you make this better? Or what could you change that might make the situation more positive? Or what do you need right now to move you forward? And holding on to that beautiful light in that way, instead of them bringing you into your vibrational field or their vibrational field and bringing you down, instead, they're able to begin to create their own connection to source, building their awareness that they've got lost in that negativity and how could they think about this positively. And in that way, as an empowered empath, you bring them into the light, you enable them to become more aware, and you're able to share that beautiful gift with this person without it draining your energy. You're able to put your own oxygen mask on before you help others. And now just take a slow, deep breath in and breathe out. And just gently open your eyes. Good, welcome back. So I hope you found that exercise useful. And I hope you now have been able to recognize why people go into their negativity and why we as empaths seem to get lost in that story, and now what you can do about that. So we've talked about how you're now able to do the ABCD. A for acceptance and awareness, so being aware of what's going on for you and being able to change that response, accepting what they're going through and separating yourself off, realizing it's not your responsibility to take it on or heal them. B, boundaries and self-care, so keeping your energy levels up as much as possible. C stands for compassion and being in that conscious compassion so that you're able to be a holding space of light for them so they don't get lost in their negativity. And D stands for discernment. So discerning what they're ready for to move forward. And as I said, the number one thing to help us, if we're empaths, is to make sure we meditate regularly. So moving on forward from here, I'd love for you to try the Meaning of Life Experiment app. You can go to the App Store or Play Store, type in Meaning of Life Experiment, and be able to download the app and experience something that can really keep you in your light, keep you connected to source, give you that strength to keep the positives of being an empowered empath without the downsides. So let's go out there. Let's be the light. So let's be a light worker for those around us who need that upliftment through our magnificent and powerful empathic ability. Thank you for watching. And so now we're going to end this Facebook Live and we're going to start a new Facebook Live on the Meaning of Life Experiment page where I'll take some questions from you. So thank you for watching and I see you next time. Thank you and goodbye.